Today's focus is on how to eliminate self-sabotage. You know, when I talk to people about succeeding in their lives, really making their goals and dreams a reality, invariably they say, I really go for it, but I just somehow manage to screw things up for myself. Just when I'm about to really make things happen, all of a sudden, whammo, I don't show up for a key meeting, or I say the wrong thing, or I treat somebody mean, or I just don't follow through, and I don't understand it. I don't know why I keep sabotaging myself in this way. Hey, sabotage only comes for one reason, and we've said this over and over again, and we're going to keep saying it because it is the foundation to understanding human behavior. If you're sabotaging yourself, it means you're stopping yourself from following through, right? Why would you do that? Take a wild guess. Because you associate more pain to following through. You're sabotaging yourself as a way of stopping yourself from doing something that you think on some level is going to create a lot of pain in your life. Now, some people think succeeding is going to create pain. It's going to make sure they feel alone or separate from other people. Remember, we've talked about this? So as they start to get close to succeeding, whammo, they sabotage. Why? Because their brain notices that, hey, the more I succeed, people around me don't seem to get too jazzed about it. When I fail, they go, oh, come here, gosh, let me talk to you. How's it going? But when they succeed, they go, oh, yeah, easy for you, buddy. Well, with that kind of conditioning, no wonder people sabotage. We've got to take control back. And the way we take control back, again, as we've done over the last 2 tapes of conditioning ourselves, is to change our associations to the thing that we're sabotaging. Now, let me bring up another point that I think is equally, maybe even more important. That is this. A lot of us jump to conclusions about sabotage. A lot of people say, well, gosh, I just keep sabotaging my success. And what I say to them is, are you sabotaging your success, or are you just doing stupid things? What I mean by that is, not everything you do that takes away from your possibility of succeeding is the result of self-sabotage. Sometimes you just make poor decisions. And you don't want to start making up in your head that there's this giant pattern dominating your life. And a lot of people do that. For example, this woman in a seminar recently stood up and she said, well, gosh, I just sabotage myself all the time. I said, well, what do you mean? She said, well, like the other day, she said, I was late for work for the 2nd time. I said, well, what does that mean? She goes, well, I was late and that screws things up. I must be sabotaging myself. I said, well, maybe you just got caught up in what you were doing. She goes, no, I think I sabotaged myself. I said, well, why else? She said, well, because not only was I late, but also I forgot some of my things at home. So I wasn't just late, I left my books at home so I couldn't conduct the appropriate meeting. I know I was sabotaging. I said, well, how often does this happen? She goes, well, I don't know, maybe once or twice a month. I said, well, maybe, ma'am, you're not self-sabotaging. Maybe you're just not paying attention. So be careful about generating this as a generalization in your mind. Does that make sense? Don't get caught up in creating a belief system when maybe something's not there. On the other hand, if you do have a pattern, realize that any pattern you have, including self-sabotage, still comes back to one thing. Human beings, no matter what we're doing, including sabotaging ourselves, we do it for a positive intent. I want you to get that. Anything we do for a positive intent. For example, if you smoke cigarettes, you're not doing it to try and create cancer in your body and destroy yourself. That's not the intent. The intent is your brain long ago linked up, hey, if I'm bored or if I'm frustrated or if I'm feeling some kind of pain of some sort, that this is a way to distract myself. This is literally a way to get rid of the pain and create some pleasure. That's what your brain has learned to do. So the intent of smoking is not to try and sabotage you. The sabotage, the physical sabotage that obviously cigarettes create for us, is not about creating sabotage. It's about creating pleasure and avoiding pain. Do you follow me? We do the same thing with alcohol. We do the same thing if you use drugs. You do the same thing if you watch TV too much. You do the same thing if you don't show up for meetings. There is always a positive intent. Your brain is trying to do something that's good for you in the form of avoiding pain and getting pleasure. So what's the challenge? Well, the challenge is, in our lives, we many times sabotage ourselves because we've got this approach avoidance thing you've heard me talk about so much in these tapes, where we have mixed neuroassociations, where we sabotage a relationship. Why? Because on the one side, remember, we've linked pleasure. If I get a relationship, it's going to be so great. How this person loves me and I can be with this person and we can share so much of life together. And yet on the other hand, we've had experiences where it's meant pain. And so our brain fries. We start to go in the relationship, it seems good, and then all of a sudden our brain goes, uh-oh, but that might mean pain. And also we get these mixed sensations, or our brain doesn't know, is it going to mean pain or is it going to mean pleasure? And when our brain doesn't know, it stops everything. It tries to stop the process of progress. Does that make sense? I'll give you a classic example. I was reading in a book of an example of how our associations can drive us crazy. And what it talked about was an experiment that was done with rhesus monkeys where they put them in a special cage. And what they did is in the cage they put red, yellow, and green squares. Well, after several days, the experimenter set it up so that the red squares in the cage gave off intermittent shocks that would cause the monkey immediate pain. Well, you can imagine the monkey became pretty anxious and pretty soon learned to avoid the red squares at almost any cost. Well, next, the experimenter caused the red and the yellow squares to give off intermittent shocks, and the monkey began to act as if he was a manic depressive. Why? Because no matter where he went, he seemed to get pain, no matter what he tried. He tried what he thought would work, tried what he didn't work, he's got pain. He started to alternate between hyperanxiety and depression and withdrawal. The monkey soon learned to avoid the red and the yellow squares, and then all the squares were electrified. Well, the little monkey began to bite itself, to beat its head against the bars, to defecate on itself. You might say the little monkey had been driven crazy. Now that's a horrible example, and I have absolute contempt for that kind of abuse of animals or people. But what I also want to point out is that this is exactly what some people do to each other. This is exactly what some people do in their own head. Some people create this experimental cage in their brain where they literally begin to link pain to everything in life. We are the ones that create the connections, though. We're the ones that establish the shocks. Because no matter what happens in your life, what you associate to things is your choice. At least after this program it is. You don't have to be at the effect. If you notice that you've begun to wire to relationships a red square called pain, you can get rid of it. Because you can know that that is a generalization. Not all relationships equal pain. And so you've got to eliminate those negative associations. Otherwise, you create your own experimental box and you pay the ultimate price. That never needs to happen to you. You have the skills in this program. And if you're not sure about them, listen to a tape again and apply them. You can take those experiences that were painful and use the erasure technique and destroy it. So you don't ever associate pain again to a relationship. Maybe you can even get it where it's somewhat humorous. Or you've at least learned something. Or you can ask yourself better questions and say, okay, it may have felt painful then, but that was only one relationship, and what did I learn so I won't have pain in the future? It's not all red squares are painful, it's that one was, and what can I learn from it so the next red square is pleasurable, or so I can rewire the red square so it supports me. I just finished doing a Date with Destiny seminar this last weekend before I did this taping with you, and the interesting thing happened is a man walked up to me and he said, Mr. Robbins, I think I should tell you before we begin that I'm into self-sabotage. I said, oh really? That sounds pretty exciting. He looked at me and said, what? I said, what am I doing? I just interrupted his pattern a little bit, started to break it up. He said, well, no, I'm serious. I said, well, I can see you're very serious. I said, but what do you mean? He said, well, for the last few years, I've been working very hard at getting out of my body. I said, getting out of your body? He said, yes. I said, what do you mean? He said, well, in the last 6 months, I've been in 3 car accidents. I said, well, that's pretty amazing. He said, and you know what else? I said, what? He said, I've been in the hospital 4 or 5 times for fainting spells. I've also fallen off a ladder. I also fell when I was exercising. And I said, well, how do you know that means you're trying to get out of your body? I said, I don't agree. He said, what do you mean? I said, listen, if you wanted to get out of your body, you would have pulled that off a long time ago. I mean, that's pretty easy. I mean, all you need is a good gun or, nice big knife. I mean, you could do it quickly. I mean, if you really were committed to getting out of your body, you would have done that a long time ago. Obviously, this self-sabotage you're talking about has a positive intent. What is it you're trying to get out of this behavior? He said, well, I don't know. I said, well, if you did know. He said, I don't know. I guess maybe I just want to know that people love me. I said, interesting. He said, God, I never even realized that till just now. I said, see, people don't sabotage. You're not trying to kill yourself. That's absurd. The bottom line is you want to feel love. And I bet, just like the example I talked about with you earlier in these tapes, with Jackknife, remember when we talked about that guy who slammed his hand through the glass and he was bleeding? And the woman who was rejecting him all of a sudden is making love to him? I said, long time ago, I told him that story, and I said, a long time ago, you obviously linked up that if you get yourself hurt and get in the hospital especially, you got all these people who come and tell you how much they love you and be with you and be worried about you. But I got to tell you something, that isn't love. That's obligation.